Dr. Naomi Wolf, thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, I'm happy to talk to you.
So I've been following the Pfizer document story as it unfolds at Dailyclout. And if you wouldn't mind, would you mind just giving our listeners just a brief overview of the project you all have undertaken?
Sure. So Dailyclout is a news site that I co-founded to make democracy easier for people to engage with. The Pfizer Documents project started in 2021 when the Pfizer papers were released due to a successful lawsuit by lawyer Aaron Siri against the FDA. And the FDA had asked the judge to keep the documents hidden for 75 years, and now we know why. So I was worried that these documents, tens of thousands of them, would go down the memory hole. Two reasons: they're so voluminous and they're very technically written. So at Steve Bannon's prompting, which is one of the great ironies of history, because we come from different sides of the aisle, we put out a call for volunteers, and we got 3,250 experts, doctors, scientists, medical fraud investigators, lab clinicians, biological scientists, every kind of medical and scientific expert qualified to read through these. And the amazing Amy Kelly, our COO and the project director, organized them into teams. They've produced 90 reports that anyone can read, that I taught them to write in English that anyone can understand, linking to the original texts. And what they found in the documents is the greatest crime against humanity in recorded history. And as a granddaughter of a woman who lost 9 brothers and sisters in the Holocaust, I say that advisedly, and with a special emphasis on sterilizing women and destroying the next generation reproductively.
Yeah, it's funny because I spoke to Dr. Robert Malone yesterday, and I kind of made a similar comparison that it's not that what we're looking at here is the crime of the century, of the 21st century, and it's not as egregious, say, for example, as the Holocaust, where it's right in your face, and it's difficult to make that comparison because for obvious sensitivities, right? But it is in that category, and I want to ask you. I want to go right into the effects that these vaccines are having on the female reproductive system, because I think that is the key element to all of this. Can you just go into detail as to what exactly is happening?
Yeah, it's so bad. Well, in many of the reports that our experts have produced, what's revealed is that the damage to women reproductively is 360 degrees. And Pfizer knew. And in fact, what's so creepy about reading the Pfizer documents, which I've, spent a lot of time looking at the primary documents, is that COVID is ostensibly a respiratory virus. There's pretty much nothing studying mucous membranes or lungs. It's all about sperm and ovaries and, sex organs. Like, they literally mate unvaccinated female and vaccinated male rats together, sacrifice the rats, and then examine the cells of their sex organs. Like, that's how creepily focused it is on reproduction. So every aspect of female reproductive capacity is damaged, and they knew it. For instance, Dr. Robert Chandler, a distinguished sports medicine physician who treated the Angels and the Lakers, found that the lipid nanoparticle, spike protein, mRNA don't stay in the deltoid, the injection site, which we were promised they would. But within 48 hours, they biodistribute to every organ in the body, accumulating in the spleen, kidneys, adrenals, brain, liver, and if you're a woman, in your ovaries. And so our team has found no mechanism whereby these materials leave the ovaries, right? So what that means is your first injection, some accumulate in your ovaries. And lipid nanoparticles are an industrial fat covered in polyethylene glycol, which is a petroleum byproduct. The second injection, more accumulate. First booster, more accumulate. And so now, unsurprisingly, nurses are leaking, like whistleblowing to us, that when women of childbearing age have abdominal surgeries, their finding that their ovaries are blocked. And this also doesn't surprise me because I was deplatformed in 2021 from Twitter for noting, and the book starts with, Facing the Beast, my new book starts with this, for noting accurately that women were reporting menstrual problems upon receiving the mRNA injections. So if your, egg can't be released from your ovary and travel through your fallopian tube, it's going to cause all kinds of problems, fertility problems, but it could also cause hormonal problems, menstrual problems. We found that the lipid nanoparticles, as I said, have been known for a decade to traverse every membrane in the body. The placenta is a membrane. So there are 2 independent midwives and Dr. James Thorpe, who was fired for having told the truth about this, a fetal maternal medicine specialist, found similar things. And to me, as a reporter, when multiple people find the same thing in different parts of the country, that's confirmation. The lipid nanoparticles are causing damage to placentas. They're compromising women's placentas who are pregnant with calcifications that keep the fetus from getting air, oxygen, and nutrients. And so there's a tremendous number of premature deliveries or women are induced prematurely because the placentas can't grow normally. As a result of these compromised placentas, you're seeing a 40% rise in deaths in childbirth because women are hemorrhaging or parts of the placenta are left in the body. These are conditions that women haven't had to deal with since the 19th century. And what's so creepy is that Pfizer knew all of this. I'll go on, but just for a moment, Pfizer knew, for instance, that lipid nanoparticles and spike protein and mRNA were getting into breast milk. And they've got a chart showing all these horrible things that were happening to babies as a result of nursing from vaccinated moms. This many babies have fever. This many babies are vomiting. This many babies have, swelling, edema. One baby in the Pfizer documents went into convulsions and died from nursing a vaccinated mom. And what's so chilling is that Pfizer knows that babies are getting sick, knows it in enough detail to fill out spreadsheets with sick babies, but are not warning vaccinated moms not to breastfeed their babies. Another example of the Mengele type science is, I mentioned menstrual problems, and it turns out that I wasn't just deplatformed and globally smeared for that tweet, but that it was directed by the White House. 2 lawsuits by attorneys general against the Biden administration found that it was the White House directing the CDC and Twitter and Facebook to single out my accurate tweet and go after me. Which is scary. I voted for them, but it's also nonetheless scary. Point is, Pfizer knew in the internal documents that what I was reporting is true because they have a chart showing 25 different horrible things they knew they were doing to women's menstrual cycles. Like this many women, 15,000 are bleeding every day of their lives. This many women don't have any periods at all, 10,000, meaning no babies, no fertility. This many women have 2 periods a month, 8,000. This many women are hemorrhaging. This many women are passing tissue, absolutely disgusting, debilitating conditions that are ruining women's lives. And they had so many examples and they knew in such detail what they were doing to women that, again, they created a chart. They created a pregnancy and lactation report in April of 2021 showing that babies were dying in utero due to, quote, maternal exposure to the vaccines. This was sent to the White House. Dr. Walensky saw it. It had the lactation chart showing the sick babies. It showed that elsewhere in the Pfizer documents, over 80% of the pregnancies ended in miscarriage. 16% of all the adverse events in women are reproductive disorders, in Pfizer's own words. This went to the White House, and Dr. Walensky 3 days later gave a press conference telling women who were considering getting pregnant to get the injection. She had this in her hand. She said there was no bad time to get the mRNA injection if you wanted to get pregnant before your pregnancy, during your pregnancy, after your pregnancy. And she knew that this was killing babies, poisoning babies, killing women. I could go on and on. Men, there's something in the sperm of vaccinated men that's damaging, from, it seems from the Pfizer documents, to women or to babies. Pfizer told vaccinated men in the study not to have unprotected intercourse with childbearing age women, or if they did, to use 2 reliable forms of contraception. They didn't want the vaccinated men to impregnate women in their study. So shedding is real. It's defined as exposure, skin contact, and inhalation, and semen in the Pfizer documents. But B, they know that there's something destructive in the sperm of vaccinated men. And one of the scandals of this time is that they know that, and they're not being forced in front of Congress or in a grand jury proceeding to say what it is they know. I get so many emails from women saying, like, should I break up with this guy? He's unvaccinated. My husband's, I'm sorry, he's vaccinated. My husband's vaccinated. Should I stop having sex with him? And I don't, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not going to answer that. I think it's horrific that Pfizer isn't telling us like what the treatment is. These injections damage the testes of baby boys in utero. They degrade the membranes around the testes. Of course, that's a membrane, testicles are closed in membrane. And they, as a result, degrade the Sertoli cells and Leydig cells in the testes. And what this is the hormonal factories of masculinity that in adolescence turn boys into men. Deep voices, broad shoulders, facial hair, the things the ability to father a child. So we don't know if these little boys who aren't even born yet are going to be able to grow up as normal men who are fertile and look like men and, turn into men as opposed to not men, essentially. Those are some of the key headlines.
Yeah, there's so much there. So I guess right off the top of my head, I'm listening to this, to what you're saying about the way that it's affecting, the male development. And I'm wondering, I mean, in your view, well, I guess first, did this seem like it was intentionally buried in these documents when you guys were going through them?
I mean, it's no more buried than anything else. What's clear from the documents is that both Pfizer and the FDA, and remember, the FDA is the custodian of these documents. It says, FDA confidential at the bottom of many of these documents. They felt like they had impunity. They felt like no one would ever haul this information into the light of day.
And so, just to be clear, these are the documents that Pfizer tried to lock away for 75 plus years, correct?
Yep.
How many documents in total?
I think it's 450,000.
Oh my God. So, I mean, it's one of those scenarios where it's like, even if they do release the documents, they never anticipated that, Naomi Wolf's Rhodes Scholar, feminist author, is going to take these documents, find 3,000 people, put it all together and start going through them. I mean, I think that the way you said it, as brazen as it is, it's like they're just looking at it like nobody's ever going to read all this. Like nobody's ever going to look to it. Now, in your view, is this intentional?
Oh, there's no question. I'd like to believe that it's just greed and carelessness. And when I first began reading the reports of our volunteers, I was still hoping and believing that that was the case. But at this point, there's no way to conclude that it's not intentional. There are a lot of reasons for that. By the way, I just really want to note whom to credit. I'm proud of my role teaching them to write in language anyone can understand. It's not easy. And I'm proud of my role, like explaining them and calling attention to them, publishing their book. But it's really the amazing Amy Kelly, my COO and the project director, who quite miraculously organized them and is helping this very complex amount of information that is not my skill set get turned into world-changing reports. I just want to say that. Yeah, it's so intentional. Like, here's an example of the adverse events. There are 42,000 plus adverse events in 3 months. 36,000 plus are in the United States. The next largest tranche are in Western Europe in order of political importance: Britain, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Greece. All the rest of the world combined, where this rolled out, 52 countries, only 7,000 adverse events. So clearly there's a targeting of the West. That's not random. And my own independent research found that BioNTech, the subsidiary of Pfizer that makes these injections, has an MOU with China to make 1 billion injections, which don't go into the people of China. They are given something else. They go to the West. China opened 14 manufacturing plants in Western Europe, 2 in the United States. And according to the SEC filing in 2021, 100% of the tech was transferred to China. So China is a country that, organ harvests their own people and locks their minorities into concentration camps. They're injecting their existential enemies with this injection, and disproportionate numbers of people are dying and being disabled in America and Western Europe, which is just what the World Economic Forum and the WHO and China want to, kill us off as a global force and leave them the only superpower. It's intentional, yeah. And the other way it's intentional is the structure of the, as I mentioned, the structure of what they're looking at. If they weren't trying to ruin fertility, they wouldn't be looking at fertility in such an intensive way. Or if they first got signals that babies were dying, that an 80% miscarriage rate was in one of the sections of the Pfizer documents, where, by the way, they lost 234 of the records out of 270. So it could be more babies died than 80%. But, you get that signal, even if it's just greed, you stop everything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've been mulling it over in my head quite a bit lately as to whether this is a unique occurrence, or if this is just something that has happened repeatedly throughout the advent of big pharma. And this is just the first time that we're really aware of it, because of the magnitude of the vaccine rollout and also because of the advent of the internet. But
Right.
But after listening to you and like I said, I've been reading all of the reports on Dailyclout. I mean, I'm 90 in, and it's
Wow.
everything I'm reading. I'm like, it's horrifying. It's a nightmare. It's the worst possible scenario we could have imagined coming out of this. Now, I have to ask, like, knowing what you know now, your team having gone through all the documents, compiling everything, like you said, into plain English so that people can read it. Where's the mainstream media on this? Like 30 years ago, this would have been on the cover of Newsweek, the New York Times, the Washington Post. Where are they? What's going on there?
I mean, that's a great question. As a journalist, like, this is the biggest and best story any real journalist could ever hope for. And I keep saying on Bannon, I keep offering the primary source underlying notes to the Washington Post, the New York Times. Come get them. We don't care. You can follow our scoop. Nothing, crickets. So, and that's very painful for me. And like I talk about this in Facing the Beast, my new book. Like, all of our institutions have collapsed. It's ridiculous that me in my guest room, Amy Kelly in her guest room, you in your guest room, are telling the world about this Pulitzer Prize level bombshell set of reports that is the biggest story in America in the 21st century. It's the biggest story. And numerically, it's bigger than the Holocaust. And I say that advisedly, just because of, 2 billion people have been injected. So, and there's a 13 to 20% drop in live births already. In the West. So it's the biggest story. And every week there are new pieces of evidence that make it bigger. For instance, Ed Dowd reporting on 1 million people in the month of August in America calling themselves disabled. That you can see why when you read these 90 reports. It's right there. Or the latest bombshells that the team brought out, which is that Pfizer hid the deaths, delayed reporting the deaths of 2 people in the vaccinated group and tampered with 38 deaths in order to get the EUA. If they had reported the deaths the way they were supposed to, there would be no difference in deaths between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated arm of the trials. So all that claim that you had to get injected to save yourself from severe disease and death was a lie, right? And Pfizer knew. This is the juiciest story. Much painful as it is as a human being for me to see this abyss of evil as a journalist, I'm like, holy heck, this is a banquet. Why are they silent? They're silent because they're complicit. They took the money. They took money from the CARES Act, millions. They took money from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, millions. And I talk about this in the prequel to Facing the Beast, which is called The Bodies of Others. They took the money to run stories overcoming vaccine hesitancy. So they're legally complicit. They're guilty of misinformation. They've lost all credibility. If they report now, and they're inching toward it, you see this, like, oh, they kind of raised the hem a little on, there's an elevated stroke level in the elderly, but it's ambiguous, or gee, maybe your period changed a day, a month, it's not a big deal. They're trying to ease into not being complicit in mass murder, but they can't actually look at the Pfizer documents, because then the question is, they can't validate them, what we're doing, because then A, they could be sued into oblivion for their role in fraud and injury, and B, they'll lose even more credibility than they've already lost. So instead, they're continuing to go after people like me via showcasing Naomi Klein's book, trying to discredit me, which I haven't read, but I'm noting that instead of spending time on reporting whether women are actually suffering horrific levels of miscarriage, they are continuing to smear my name, try to portray me as a crazy person, undermine my reputation. And the same is true of the Washington Post. They can't admit how wrong they were, probably for legal reasons, but also it's embarrassing. You're the paper of record. Yeah. And they didn't get it wrong once. They got it wrong over and over and over, intentionally. They carried water for these murderers. I mean, I remember tweeting Apurva Mandavili, I'll stop, I promise, but Apurva Mandavili is the New York Times reporter tasked with all things COVID. In 2021, she was like, oh, pregnant women, it's safe and effective. Pregnant women, it's safe and effective. I followed this very closely, even before the Pfizer documents. I'm tweeting to her, Apurva, where are these data? These data don't exist. On what basis are you making this claim? She finally blocked me. But that was the New York Times reporter, and she's not fired; she's been promoted. Yeah. So that's the level of guilt these legacy news outlets have.
That's what I think it boils down to. It's like there's the overarching conspiracy that everybody's in on it. I think what it boils down to, and I was talking to Dr. Pierre Corey about this, is that I think a lot of doctors have this just incredible amount of guilt that they're carrying around because they were recommending these vaccines to pregnant women, to young children. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I am so thankful that I was listening to people like you, and I never ever put that poison in either one of my children. I know you have to run, and just before you go, I just do want to talk about your new book really quick, Facing the Beast. Can you just give us a quick summarization?
Sure. It's out tomorrow and it's shipping now. So please go to Amazon and order it, because we're up against the usual media blackout. And if you like it, please share it. But it tells the story of these volunteers and presents their life-saving information. It also tells my story of the last 2.5 years, how I got, kicked out of my community on the left. The only people who would talk to me were conservatives and libertarians and people of faith, which was very interesting. How that led me to re-examine a lot of my core beliefs, and ultimately how I came to conclude that we're in a battle that's bigger than human politics, and that it's actually a metaphysical battle we're in right now between good and evil with metaphysical dimensions.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been listening to your Exodus series. I just listened to your Neo-Marxism and the End of Language. I'm a giant fan of yours. I've been a fan of yours forever. I just want to talk about the Naomi Klein thing really quick, because I did skim through that book. I actually bought the Beauty Myth way back in the day because I mistook I just saw Naomi on the cover, and then I read it. And now as a grown man with a 6-year-old daughter, I'm so glad I read it. And I'm a tremendous fan of yours. So thank you so much. It was a huge honor to talk to you today, an honor to speak to you on the eve of your book release. And thank you so much for your time, Dr.
Thank
Wolf.
you so much. I appreciate you as well. Take care.